It might not be the same level of shakeup, but there is actually a lot happening at the top of the metagame. Let's take a look at some decks that are benefiting from these changes. The most obvious place the changes from the OTA are felt is in the form of Nightcrawler, who has become a genuine piece of competition to Hydra Bob in decks like Supergiant, and frankly, a lot of decks that were previously playing a Hydra Bob. While Hydra Bob is one more point of power, not being able to control where he moves, or even if he's going to move without interacting with the snap system, means that Nightcrawler has become not just a great budget replacement, but a card that probably actually supersedes Hydra Bob in a lot of spots. This is an interesting development. I expected it to be like second Bob a lot of the time, but it's really that Bob is kind of becoming second Nightcrawler. This is the Supergiant list that I think is roughly optimal for this metagame. The addition of Nightcrawler gives us a little bit more flexibility in the mid game. One of the worst feelings with this deck is when you just aren't able to output enough points in a meaningful way and you have to play off curve in order to start doing things. Like when, for example, you would really like to be able to play a turn 3 Iron Patriot, but you have to choose between that and using your energy effectively. Having a 1-drop you can weave into your curve is just a really useful thing in a deck like this, because it allows you to get as many points as you possibly can on the board while contesting those Iron Patriot lanes in a really meaningful and powerful way. And Nightcrawler is really good at that. So this is definitely a buff to Supergiant. Supergiant is a much better deck with the addition of this 1-drop. Before we even had access to this Nightcrawler, I was already looking to add a 1-drop to the list, and this is definitely the spot where the changes in the OTA yesterday are going to be felt the most. This is a deck that actually got meaningfully better. It got to get closer to what it should be looking like because it actually has cards that make sense in that spot now. Huge shout out to Nightcrawler. Definitely a bigger change than I thought it would be. Another place Nightcrawler is starting to show up is in Batroc lists. Now, I'm not sure he's going to make the cut in normal Batroc lists, but in the Batroc lists playing Sholo, I think Nightcrawler is starting to make a serious case for being a better card than Hydra Bob for many of the same reasons as he would be in the list we just talked about. This is a list when you're playing Sholo that needs a lot of 1-drops. A lot of normal Batroc decks will skimp on those in order to get their card quality higher. But when you're playing Sholo, you need cards that trigger Sholo, and that means you need a certain volume of 1-drops. And I think it's become pretty clear over the last 24 hours that Nightcrawler actually is just better than Hydra Bob in a lot of spots. I didn't expect it to go like this, but a lot of what's going on right now is if you were playing Hydra Bob, you are now playing Nightcrawler in everything other than a deck that synergizes with end of turn, like Aurora, or maybe something along the lines of a Fantasticar Invisible When First Steps deck. Pretty much everything else you're going to be playing Nightcrawler in, and this is no exception. This list is from Iris, of course, and it uses the 1-drops and Sholo in order to have a meaningfully powerful mid-range game plan. It's sort of the peak of mid-range lists is sort of how I think about how this deck functions. The idea here is basically just, yeah, everyone else is going to be playing mid-range lists that are meaningfully countering Star-Lord, or they're going to be playing Star-Lord, and you can just treat that like it's Mr. Negative a lot of the time, where if they do the thing, you're just fine to go and leave. That's okay. And that means that this deck gets to just eat up on all the people that are doing counters to Star-Lord. Like, if someone is playing Jean Grey Cosmo on a deck like this, they're going to lose, because this is probably the best deck in the game at playing around Jean Grey Cosmo, at filling up lanes, at doing all the stuff that you would want to be doing and beating that deck with. There's just a lot to be said for this build specifically. It is a little bit giving up on the Star-Lord matchup, which is a contextual metagame-based decision, but if you're willing to make that call, this is one of the best decks in the game. Of course, if you're not willing to make that call, the other Batroc list is here waiting for you. Nightcrawler showing up once again here as a Hydra Bob replacement. This is naturally the Batroc list that is built to beat Star-Lord. It is a very safe pick, perhaps the safest pick in the entire game. I would argue between this and Supergiant, if you are scared of Star-Lord, taking one of these lists is the right decision. These are lists that are extremely prepared for it, but also have very well thought out and coherent game plans. Disruption that puts them in the game against basically any deck. Daredevil, Negasonic, and Cosmo is an extremely powerful package. If you want to double up on beating Star-Lord, you can even get a Supergiant in here. I'm not particularly convinced convinced it's worth doing. That's how good the deck already is into Star-Lord, but you can do it if you really, really, really want to beat him. The Star-Lord list that I like the most right now is this one from Honifer. It's built to beat the counters as best it can while maintaining some of the nut draw power that allows Star-Lord to be as dominant as it is. If Star-Lord has to get nerfed, my bet is that it's because of a deck like this that is trying to, as best it possibly can, adapt to all the things that are beating your face in. If people are beating you up with Cosmo, you can protect yourself with Echo. If they're beating you up with Jean Grey, you can use Wasp in order to play outside of the Jean Grey lane. If they're beating you up with Negasonic, you can counterplay that with Wasp as well. And indeed, Wasp even takes up a space in the front line if you're worried about big Fin Fang Fooms. You have the ability to deal with a bunch of different things in a deck like this. You are giving up on some of the real endgame power, some of the real nut draws. No Zola, no Eliath, no Grandmaster. We're not doing any of the maximal investment stuff here, and instead we're playing a relatively safer game that is able to play a good turn 5 Star-Lord game plan, a good turn 6 Star-Lord game plan thanks to Magic, and is able to deal with other Star-Lord decks with cards like Magic and various counterplays to Fin Fang Foom. Turn 5 Magic is a really good way to win Star-Lord mirrors, but it's also pretty good against a lot of the things that are going to try to beat you. Just having extra turns to deal with what they are doing and just playing your big guys out normally, well, a lot of the time, people that are counterplaying you are giving up on a certain amount of power in order to make that happen. So you just get to be bigger than them naturally. This Honifer's list, I think it is probably the best constructed version of this deck that I've seen. And if it is able to successfully break through and beat up on all the people the way that I kind of think it can and should and will, we might actually be right back into the thick of Star-Lord meta discourse, because I think this is quite a powerful hybrid list. The deck I've personally had the most success with recently is the 2099 list from Ika. This is a really powerful list that is looking to take advantage of everyone who's playing things that are just a little bit smaller. A lot of the dynamic of the metagame right now is warped around Star-Lord because he's such a powerful thing with so many plays that are very good against him. But a lot of those things that are very good against him do very little against a deck like this. Someone is snapping a, Batroc thing against you, and you're like, okay, well, I play Mercury. Someone is snapping a Supergiant against you, you're like, okay, well, I play Doom 2099. There's just a lot of points in this package that aren't being interacted with in a meaningful way because Star-Lord is sort of drawing the fire of everyone who's trying to beat stuff with interaction. It's almost like the end of Lord of the Rings, where Star-Lord is Aragorn's army and this deck is Frodo getting to getting to Mount Doom without being noticed. Like, that's kind of what's going on here. This deck is very, very strong. It's, again, not unbeatable. A lot of combo decks will go over the top of it. It's just that, like, a lot of combo decks also lose to the stuff that's targeting Star-Lord, and a lot of combo players are just playing Star-Lord because it's a really good combo deck. And so you end up with a bunch of people protecting you from the things that would beat you, and then you beat them. And that's just kind of what this deck plays like. It's like an amazing dumb guy deck. If you are like relatively low rank and you don't want to think about anything and you don't see like a bunch of Star-Lord, you don't want to be like, oh, I want to go counter the Star-Lord, you can just play this and it'll probably beat everyone that isn't a Star-Lord deck. Like, genuinely. Like, it just seems really favored into all the things people are doing to beat up Star-Lord. This metagame is moving, as weird as that may seem. And if you are, and like, it's moving at different paces at different ranks. So largely my advice would be identify where in the cycle you are. At the top end of Infinite, we're sort of circling back to Star-Lord because a bunch of people are playing stuff that beats the stuff that beats Star-Lord. You saw that with the Honifer list. Circle back to Star-Lord, beat the counters, but also beat this. Everywhere else, it seems like they're still in the throes of like original Star-Lord, or maybe they're playing a bunch of the counters. That kind of stuff, identifying where you are in the metagame cycle and then going the step beyond that to beat where everyone else at your rank is, that's what's going to let you climb this season. As an illustration of just how much you can get done at High Infinite if you just have a plan for the Star-Lord matchup and a bunch of stats, Here is what Jaywalla has been playing. It is basically Super Giantless Super Giant, where the premise here is that Super Giant is not actually helping us very much, and we're just going to play stats instead of Super Giant and rely on Gene Cosmo to shut down anything anyone is going to do that's going to combo us. This is the exact kind of list, and I put this on here not to say, wow, this list is amazing, but to just sort of illustrate how, like, this is the floor, right? You can kind of just play a Star-Lord counter and a bunch of cards, and it'll beat Star-Lord. And if that's enough for you to climb at your rank, that makes it a good deck. This is one of the more unique metagames in terms of that. Like, I think it's very fair to say that this metagame is warped around Star-Lord without him being immensely overpowered at the same time. It's an interesting dynamic, but the play rate and relative power of it and the profile the deck has means that any deck that is just actively trying to beat it, well, it will. And so then the question is, how low can you go? Because you look at like the Super Giant decks, there's actually not a lot of points in that. And so you just have these decks that are like, well, I'm going to be on average 5 points more than the Super Giant list, and I'm going to beat the Star-Lord decks. And so I'm going to have enough winning matchups in the metagame that I'm just actually going to be a good enough deck to play. And that's kind of what this deck is doing. And I think that's like a really interesting thing, because we haven't had decks like this viable in Marvel Snap where it's just like, here's a pile of stats and some interactive tech. And this is 2023. Like, it's been a very long time since we were able to deck build like this. And to me, it almost feels like what's happening at High Infinite is the preponderance of Star-Lord has sort of reset the metagame to 0. All the stuff people do with Star-Lord is like, okay, that's really strong. Now we're going all the way back to the bottom and playing Cosmo to beat you. We're going all the way back to the bottom and playing Cosmo Jean Grey, Daredevil Cosmo, Super Giant. It's a 4-6, right? We're playing a 2-3 and a 3-3. We're playing a 3-4 and a 3-3. And when you're in that world, well, a lot of stuff will just lose to just better points than that. It's a very interesting metagame. And Jaywalla hit rank 6 with this. Like, this is not just like, ha, 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 look at all the stuff you can get away with, even though that is what I'm using it to illustrate. Like, we're in a kind of uncharted territory as far as this metagame is going. Like, we haven't ever really been here before. They haven't made a season pass card that is this combo-centric before. And because of the fact that it's a season pass card, because it's a combo card, because it is doing certain things to the metagame, all sorts of things are viable that almost never otherwise would be. And Ramp is a great example. This is one of my favorite decks in the entirety of Marvel Snap. I view it as sort of a side grade to the Doom 2099 deck. They're kind of the same deck, except Ramp is a little more consistent and I enjoy it a little bit more. But this is a deck that, in a world where everyone is doing like, ooh, look at all my things that counter Star-Lord, just playing cards that are big is kind of good enough. It's a very interesting dynamic because the Star-Lord counters are all so low on power that you can just beat them with like a Hulk. Like, that's the thing that's going on in this metagame. It feels ripe for exploitation, ripe to just be like, all right, well, I'm going to play a normal deck. And then if I get Mr. Negatived by someone playing Star-Lord, I'll leave because that's what I do anyway. And that's just a dynamic that, as this metagame evolves, I think is going to define this month of Marvel Snap. What are you doing about Star-Lord? Are you beating them or are you retreating to them? It's a very binary thing. And this is, of course, just a really good deck if people are playing normal mid-range. Like, if what you've done to beat Star-Lord is tech out your normal mid-range deck, well, Ramp feels amazing about that matchup. Ramp is super happy to just be like, yeah, I'll fill this lane up. Nice Jean Grey. I've got 38 points here, and I played a Fin Fang Foom somewhere else. I'm with it. I'm cool. Like, Ramp is so happy to do that. It's like extremely, extremely happy to play in this sandbox. It's a weird thing. KM Worst has been messing around with the Clea Sholo package, and I think this is probably worth showing off, in no pun intended, in large part because I think that it's very possible that where this whole metagame ends up is the end of last month. I don't know if that's where it's going to go, but there's a world where enough people are countering Star-Lord that people don't really want to play Star-Lord. And that means that we're just going to be going back up and building up what's the mid-range deck that beats the other mid-range decks. And I think the answer is very plausibly Sholo. And I think that that kind of stuff, this kind of dynamic that's been created where people are doing things that beat Star-Lord but aren't actually that good into the other mid-range decks leaves a lot of opportunity for those kind of decks to exist. And that is what this deck is taking advantage of. If you want to play a version of the new Shang-Chi card, this is definitely the deck that you want to do it in. There's just so much beneficial stuff going on here, even though you are slightly less likely to do a lot of your cool stuff. I really can't overstate just how powerful it is to do the Clea into Shang-Chi stuff. That is extremely, extremely strong. It's one of the strongest starts you can have in a sort of fair Marvel Snap game, and there are a lot of fair Marvel Snap games happening right now. You can do a ton of work here as long as you are willing to treat your opponents with the respect that they deserve. This deck has some of the strongest draws in the game, but it does have a relative lack of consistency in accessing those draws because it's a Shang-Chi deck. The card is reasonable when it works, though, and I would argue more than reasonable. When you are able to pull off Clea into Shang-Chi, you are doing some real stuff there. It's just, you're going to have some really painful moments where you play another turn 1 card, and then you draw Clea on turn 2, and you're like, oh, well, there goes my entire curve. I can't do this anymore. That's definitely a painful thing, but the strength of the deck when it draws in the right order, and the fact that it is able to be just a generally powerful deck outside of that, it's a relatively forgiving deck thanks to just how Sholo functions. You're just gonna get a lot of power out of him no matter when you draw him. This deck can do some stuff. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. At the end of this video, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how hard it's been to talk about Star-Lord. I find it really, a lot of the time, there's not a super meaningful gap between advice that is applicable at High Infinite and elsewhere. Like, a lot of the time, the best deck at High Infinite is going to be the best deck everywhere, right? This is one of those cases where I think it's worth pointing out that it's quite different. And it's rare that I feel like this is meaningful and that I have to do this, because a lot of the time people say this and it's not true. But I think right now there's some things going on that make this very similar to like a move bounce metagame, for example, where it's worth calling out that there are going to be some really different trends with players that are staying on top of things and being current with the metagame than there are going to be elsewhere. And the largest one is willingness to retreat against Star-Lord and willingness to counterplay Star-Lord. I don't know what it's like in whatever elo you watching this is in. At High Infinite, everyone has already figured that out. It is like baked in that either you're prepared for Star-Lord or you're going to treat it like Mr. Negative. And if you are prepared for Star-Lord, you're going to beat it. If you're treating it like Mr. Negative, you're leaving when they snap. That's it. Like, that's already baked in. That's already happened. And in the world where that has happened, suddenly the metagame starts lurching forward, right? You see Honifer's list that is built to counterplay the counterplay. You see the lists that are built to be bigger than the counterplay decks, like the Doom 2099 list. All of that stuff is predicated on that first thing happening, though. So if that first thing hasn't happened, I highly recommend that you just play a Star-Lord counter, because they work. That's the biggest thing that has given me trouble making videos like this. And I think you could probably see it throughout the recording of this video, is I kept trying to like middle this and explain it. And I eventually realized that I just have to put this on the end, because otherwise it probably won't make sense. But if you're in a world where you're still seeing a lot of Star-Lord, don't listen to this. Or, you know, do listen to this. You can learn stuff, but like, just play the Batroc deck that counters it, right? Like, or play like a Jean Grey Aurora deck, right? Like all of that stuff is going to be way more fruitful for you. If you're someone who watches this video and you're like, there's not enough stuff that beats Star-Lord on here, just go play one of the decks that beats Star-Lord. For the record, I do think, like, you know, Super Giant will do it. The Batroc deck that we had on here will do it. There's plenty of decks on here that are showing respect to it, but I just don't want people to be like, oh, I played Ramp and Doom 2099 because KM said so and they beat Star-Lord, and I lost to Star-Lord a bunch, because those decks are predicated on other people beating Star-Lord for you. And if that's not happening in your metagame, you need to be the other people and beat Star-Lord, right? Like, that's what I'm trying to get at here. I don't know those two recommendations specifically, how well they percolate downwards. I'm really interested to find out. As always, I've been KMBest. You've been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one.